before we start Perek Tesvav, there was one chazal that I wanted to learn.
Hi.
Hi.
Hello.
Hello.
So in
Hatzibah Tova.
Mar Chatima Tova, in Pasuk Mem Zayin, one of the last psukim of the previous Perek, the pasuk said, "V'shol lachad amlucha Yisrael, v'ilachem saviv b'chol oivav." It describes sort of Shaul's exploits. He did battle among his enemies, b'Moab, of Ammon, of Edom, v'Chitzov, of Plishtim, and then of v'chol asher yifneh, wherever he turned Yarshia, it led to confusion. Is the way most of the Meforshim explain Yarshia. The Goram Shol Bilbu v'Charod l'chol misham, and anyone who stood against him, it created confusion. Chazal took that point up, and Chazal in Erevin Daf Nun Gimel Amud Aleph says, David Gali Masechta, Shaul Lo Gali Masechta. David revealed Torah learning, let's call it halacha. Shaul Lo Gali Masechta. David Gali Masechta Ksiv Bei Yerecha Yeruni V'Yismochu. They're going to be happy with the Divrei Torah that I said. Shaul Lo Gali Masechta Ksiv Bei Uv'chol Asher Yifnei Yarshia. It's going to lead to it led to Bilbu. What's going on here? So the basic shot was, like we learned, that he caused confusion to his enemies. But the Gemara took up this concept that be'inyonei divrei Torah lo haya b'koach Shaul ki imrak lebalbel ulahavil lidei mevucha. Shaul's journey into Torah led to confusion. We are, many times those of us who attend shiurim will say, you know what, the kasha was better than the teretz. Meaning, many times somebody asks a really good question, but the resolvement of the question isn't that good. So Shaul asked really good kashas, but he didn't have very good answers. Like, we're going to learn tonight in the famous parak that we learn that we learn as the Haftorah on Parsha Zochor, that Shaul is going to make a kal v'chomer regarding why he thought it was not appropriate to wipe out all of Amalek. So we'll see. It was a good kasha, but uvizman she'yafshar liyashev zakushios. I'm reading from the Musar Nevi'im. Yafshar liyos besimcha. I once saw Rav Yoshe Ber Soloveitchik talk about when it says Lo hayu yomim toivim ki Yisrael, like Tu B'Av and Yom Kippurim. So there's a lot of discussion about that chazal. What is Tu B'Av after Yom Kippur, and why those? And because it was great simcha on Yom Kippur, and we used that simcha, they made shiduchim, just like they made shiduchim on Tu B'Av. They made it on, because shiduchim, chosen v'kala are a chetz of simcha. What's the shaychus of simcha to Yom Kippur? So Rav Soloveitchik explained that we get mechila and slicha on Yom Kippur. There's no greater simcha than hataras hasfekas. When you're in doubt and your doubts are removed, you have tremendous simcha. He also talks about dveikis, that when you are dovek in Hashem, it leads to great simcha. But here it shows this issue that asking kashas, if you don't have the ability to solve them, it will not lead to great simcha. But that's why the pasuk that relates to David HaMelech says, Yerecha Yeruni V'Yismachu. David hayabekoch lefarek uli yashav es advar makoshim. David HaMelech had the ability to ask questions, but also to answer them well. That's why he talked about simcha by him. Ki divrei Torah she'en b'hem shum bilbul. Torah that's without confusion, mevin l'dei simcha nefesh. That's what it means that Shaul lo gali maseches, David gali maseches. Because Shaul only led to that's this concept of bilbul. Okay, I thought that was a very interesting chazal, and how they darshan it from the pasuk. So I'm ready to move on to our new parak. So parak Tesvav, like I said, we lane this parak every year on Parsha Zochor. We will see why as we go through the parak. And this is the parak that leads really to Shaul's loss of the Melucha. Pasuk Aleph, Vayomer Shmuel Shaul, Osi shalach Hashem limeshachacha lemelech. Shmuel reminds Shaul that Hashem sent him to be Moshechim, to be king, al amo al Yisrael, ve'ata shma l'kol divrei Hashem. Now is the time for you to listen to Hashem. And says Rashi, Pamachas niskalta, if you remember, Perek Yud Gimel, when Shaul did not wait for Shmuel, and Shmuel had told him to wait and not offer the korbanos yet, and he didn't wait. And on Pasuk Yud Gimel of Perek Yud Gimel, Vayomer Shmuel el Shaul niskalta, you were foolish. Lo shamarta mitzvot Hashem lokech asher tzivach. Hashem wanted your melucha to be forever, but said Shmuel then, your melucha will not continue. So there were already rumblings that Shaul's melucha was not going to last. And here, atah yizhar ba'atzmacha. So Shmuel warned Shaul very directly that now is your last chance. I want to go into that a little bit more. Why did we need this hakdama of Shmuel? Why do we need this introduction? So we explained before, Ki hanagat hamelech tzarich liot legamri al pi Hashem b'li shum pniya. A Jewish king is like no other king. A Jewish king has to follow Torah and has to follow the Navi. The Chashash Shmuel, or Isa ben Nevuah, the Shaul haylo natil doros lahoros dvorim mitorah shalom ad lasos dvorim k'fi havana daito. Shaul was a thinker, and he had he came up with a lot of things in Torah on his own. Udelo kedivrei hanavi. V'chein asar Shaul begilgash lo himtinat sheba Shmuel. Right? He didn't wait for Shmuel that time. So he started losing the melucha there. Ki yisod ha'malchus hu lasos dvar Hashem b'li cheshbonot. The Musar Nevi'im goes further and says differently. This is more Rashi's pshat that we went through, but the Musar Nevi'im says sometimes when a person does a chet, it actually leads to something good. It says in Gittin, "Ein adam oimed on Daf Mem Gimel, ein adam oimed al divrei Torah el im kein nichshol behen." A person sort of will stand firmly in Torah only after he trips over it. It means he makes a mistake, and then as it becomes a Baal Tshuva, it becomes very strong that he won't do it again. Ki ein adam megia lemidat hazihirut mitzvot Torah el im kein nichshol behen. When a person becomes a Baal Tshuva, it's very appropriate for this week, Yom Kippur, aziva sachet, you have to leave the chet behind and never come back to it. So a person, if he commits once a chet, he's going to be very zoyer in the future not to do it again. So Va'ata says Shmuel, Shema l'kol Hashem ki kiven shenichshalta pamachas. You already made this mistake once. Im tishma l'kol Hashem yeh b'zeh tikun lachet harishon. In fact, if you follow exactly what Hashem wants you to do here, this will be a tikkun, like the Rambam says in Hilchos Tshuva. You're not really about tshuva until you are in the same place, in the same mokum, in the same circumstance that led you to do the chet before, and you withstand and don't do it again. So this is a sort of an opposite pshat of Rashi, the Musar Nevi'im has, that really Shaul did it as a chizuk for him. However, warned him that if he's not successful, this will be your final downfall. We are going to see also tonight a chazal where it says that Shaul did this sin, where we'll see he didn't listen to the Divrei Hanavi, and he loses his Melucha. Now, David HaMelech also sinned twice, says Chazal, but he didn't lose his Melucha. So the question is why? Why did Hashem not makabel the tshuva of Shaul? It took the Malchus from him. He didn't do the same thing by David. So the Sefer HaIkarim explains, Ki chet Shaul haya binyanei hamlucha. Part of the being chosen as the king involves the act of Mechias Amalek. So it's part of the Melucha. And the Sefer HaIkarim brings a mashal. You have Shnei Soifrim Shechatu. A king had two scribes. One scribe counterfeited shtaros, and the other one committed some kind of immoral act. Now both have to get punished, but only the second one gets returned to his job as a scribe, because the first one, his job is a scribe, and he sinned as a scribe in counterfeiting. So same thing, David chata kasher hu adam. David's chet with Uriah. And also we'll see when he counted Klal Yisrael, they weren't necessarily as it relates to him being king, but Shaul sinned because part of this tzivui of Shmuel HaNavi is because of he's the melech. So that's why it was Mida Keneged Mida, the Malchus had to be taken from him. Shlomo HaMelech, says the Sefer HaIkarim, Chata b'divrei noshim, b'ribui noshim, she mitzvahs HaMelech, right? One of the mitzvahs in the Torah, when it describes what a king should do, shouldn't have too many wives. Shlomo HaMelech took too many wives, so therefore his Malchus was torn from him. Rechavam, his son, the Malchus was split. However, Yehu HaMelech, he was supposed to destroy the house of Yeravam. He had many children that sat on the throne after him, even though he was choit to many other things. So Shmuel was, by telling him this, now listen to Hashem, mitzvah zui mishtalshelis b'mashem shechas hamelech. This is directly related to why you were appointed king. Now, let's analyze a little bit the chiyuv of Mechias Amalek. Is this a chiyuv that's on a yachid, or is it only on the tzibur? So the Yalkut Me'am Loez discusses this, that Shaul in the past was very effective in defensive war, but not in Milchemes Mitzvahs Hashem, for example, to fight Amalek. It says in Sanhedrin, Daf Chaf Amud Beis, V'chein haya Rabbi Yehuda omer, Sholish mitzvos nitztavu Yisrael b'knisason la'aretz. Klal Yisrael were commanded to do 3 mitzvos: La'amid lahem melech, to appoint a king; La'achri zar shel Amalek, to wipe out Amalek; V'livnos lahem beis habechira, Those were the 3 mitzvahs they were supposed to do. So now that Shaul was appointed king, was mutal on him this mitzvah of Mechias Amalek. V'hu choivas hatzibur. So therefore, it was mutal on Shaul because he's now the melech of this tzibur. For example, let's look at the lashon of the Rambam in Hilchos Malachim. Ein hamelech nilcham tchila el milchemes mitzvah. The first kind of war a king should fight is milchemes mitzvah. Ezu milchemes mitzvah, zu milchama shivas amomim. We had to wipe out the 7 nations. Milchemes Amalek, and to destroy Amalek. The Ezras Yisrael miad tsar shebalim, and to save Yisrael from any enemies that come to them. Then he can do Milchemes HaReshus if he wants to expand the borders of Klal Yisrael, but you have to do these mitzvahs first, like to expand the borders of Eretz Yisrael. Then he says in Halacha Daled, mitzvah sasei lachrim shiva amamim. The 7 nations, Shenema Acharem Tachrimem V'chol Sheba Liyodo Echad Mehen V'lo Argo Oviv Lo Taseh. So, if any of these people we had met them and we didn't kill them ourselves, we would have been chayiv a lot. We would have been oiver alav. Now, this existed until Sancheriv in 702 BCE, because Sancheriv Melech Ashur took the 10 tribes away. It was Mabalbel, all the nations. So we don't really know who anybody is. So the Sheva Amim, we don't know. Now we're going to ask, well, how do we know Amalek? We'll get there. But let's see what the Rambam says regarding the mitzvah of Mechias Amalek. Mitzvah sasei la'abed zecha Amalek, shneimar timcha zecha Amalek, u'mitzvah sasei liskor tamid masav aroim k'dei la'or evasot, that you should hate him. So you see, the mitzvah of Hariga Shiva Samamim is a mitzvah kol yochid v'yochid. Like he said, the kol shabali yodo echad mehem v'lo hargo oiver v'lo tasei. Aval etzel Amalek there in Halacha Hey, he didn't say that. So the Griz, Soloveitchik, the son of Rab Chaim, who was the brother of Rav Moshe Soloveitchik, Rav Moshe Soloveitchik was the Rosh Hashiva in YU, and his son, Rav Yoshe Ber, of course, became Rav Yoshe Ber Soloveitchik, but Rav Moshe's brother was the Griz, who was Rav Chaim's son. And he, of course, followed in his father's footsteps. The Nira Davi Mishum, the mitzvahs Mechias Amalek, Hirak Ayadei Milchama, V'lo B'stam Hariga. There's a concept of Milchama. Milchama is not something done by a Yachid. It's done by the Tzibur. So therefore, it's a Choivas HaTzibur. The mitzvah, and he brought a proof. The mitzvahs Mechias Amalek Choivas Tzibur. The mitzvahs Minui Melech Ubnias Beis HaMechira Vaday the Choivas Tzibur Heim. Appointing a king and building the Beis HaMikdash, it's not on any one Yachid, it's on the Tzibur. So since those 3 mitzvahs are combined together, he says Mechias Amalek is also als.
Ernie, can I ask something? When in Perek Yud Gimel, when Shaul brings the Ola to the Mizbeach, and he's told by Shmuel, V'atam mamlachta lo sakum. So isn't that like a fait accompli? You're saying now that he has a chance to do tshuva for that.
We're gonna see that event. Some of the unfortunate we're going to learn tonight are going to say he might have had an opportunity to, for example, live longer personally on the throne. His malchus was going to end, but now we'll see with what happens with Mechias Amalek and not listening, that leads to a quicker end for Shaul. So there is an additional problem that occurred because of what we're going to learn in this parak on top of what happened before. So Pasuk Beis, Ko Amar Hashem Tzvakos. This is Shmuel again, still speaking to Shaul. Okadati et asher asa Amalek liYisrael. I know what Amalek did to Klal Yisrael. Asher samlo baderech. He ambushed us in the road. What is this? I'll leave this. Ba'aloisom Mitzrayim. So Ata lech v'hikisa. go now and smite them, es Amalek. V'acharamtem es kol asher lo. Not only that, not only you have to kill them, you have to put everything that they own into cherem. You can't benefit. V'lo tachmol alav. You can't have compassion on him. V'heimata meish adisha. You shall kill him, man, women, me olel v'adonai, children, mishor ad sem, migamav ad chamor, every animal that they own. Rashi, mishor vad seh, shayu balik shofim u'mishanin atzman v'doimim lehema. He says Rashi says the reason they had to wipe out the animals is because Amalek were balik kishuv, and they could convert themselves into animals. So you wouldn't have wiped out all of Amalek if you kept the animals alive. That's Rashi's pshat. But we're going to learn a little different pshat as well.
Ernie, they use the term over here, Hashem Tzvakot. That's not a typical way to refer to. Why are they using the term Hashem Tzvakot?
I didn't see any comments on Hashem Tzvakos is used to describe Hashem, particularly in when Hashem is going to have a host regarding battle. I didn't see any comments regarding why there's a use of the Hashem Tzvakos here. The Meforshim are not intrigued by they don't consider it enough of a change where they commented on it.
Okay.
An interesting point. However, the Radak says, different than Rashi, that since a shor chamor is mishlal Amalek, varelo nimcha zer Amalek, because people will say, oh, this is an animal that belonged to Amalek. So he says you have to wipe out the animals. All zecher Amalek had to be removed. Now, the question is, why is Amalek being treated differently than other nations? Maishna Amalek mikol shar umos hagoyim arishoim shalachamum Yisrael. We did many enemies. We didn't wipe them out, all their children, the wives, the children, their animals. Now, there is a mitzvah, for example, for the Sheva Amim, limchototam, larogotam, vafil anoshim vayeladim. Rak b'zaynam amamim atzinu, lo tichia kol neshama. Afa nekevos vayeladim, by the 7 nations. The Gigoshi, right? But there, it said, Abei da'abduna kol ha'mekomot, asher avdu shama. You have to destroy their place of avodah zarah. We didn't see, Ach lo matzinu mitzvah la'abei kol b'em tam rechusham. We didn't see by the 7 nations to get rid of their assets. So what's the yesod achiluk? Because you have to get rid of their zeicher. So if you're left with one behema, you'll say this is a shore that belonged to Amalek. The other question is, what is the yesod of why Amalek is singled out by Hashem? This chasing of Klal Yisrael was 400 years ago from where we are now. After all this time, why is Hashem commanding us to take vengeance against Amalek? The Malbim talks about 5 reasons why nations go to war. 1, those of you who have the Malbim in your Mikros Gedolos, you can follow along. Sheyilcham al eretz lekavsha lahagdil sartso. 1 reason why people go to war is to enlarge their borders. But when Amalek attacked us, that was on a road. We weren't even in Eretz Yisrael at that time. So they didn't have that as a reason. Sometimes when a nation gets close to a border, we're afraid he's going to invade, like by Sichon and by Og. But we were leaving Mitzrayim. There was no coming, we weren't coming near anybody's border. Sometimes there's Eza Meriva, Sheyesh Bo Shnei Amim Alaychamim. But that was not, Hu Korcha B'derech Mikra. When it says Asher Korcha B'derech, Amalek happened to meet up with us. This wasn't a nation that was dwelling with us. Sometimes people go to war. La'aros gvurato v'tokfol yad lo l'shem. They want to become a mighty nation like Rome. But the Torah described Amalek who's zanav. Kol ha'nachashlim atayev yageya. Shelo kivei la'aros koach b'krav. He was not out there to show how strong he was in battle. Sometimes people go to war because of religion, bavur adat. Shechoshev shashem yirtzeh masav shechid uma bilti memnat b'datov elokav. Like we know, the holy wars, the Christians waged war, the Muslims waged war. But Amalek was not a Yirei Elokim. There was no Siba for his Milchama. The Siba alone, the way the Meforshim, the Malbim says, Machmas HaKfira be'Elokim. They were the first atheists. They were Koifer Hashem. That's again the concept of Vayikir, that it's all Mikra, that the way the world works is not with Hashgach of Hashem, but it's just happenstance. It's like Stephen Hawking and the atheists of today, that it's all random. This is Amalek. Like it says, Shamu Amim Yir Gazun. The rest of the nations were wondered by the miracles at the Yam Suf, but not Amalek. They Stafka wanted to fight us. Laharot she'ein bi'cholat Hashem lo shiyam. And Sinoso al Yisrael mitzad Abusayim, there was a brotherly hatred because they are descended from Esav, because of Lakichas Abuchar Bimenu Sha'asa Esav Eved Liyaakov. This is pure anti-Semitism. Hatred of the Jewish people. The Malbim says because they are descended of Esav, and Esav still holds it against us, and because we are the people of the book and the people who wave the flag of Hashem. Kol kocham hayara, and therefore ef shalaniach ba'olam. This is a war of Hashem against this evil. It's not a Torah's oynish to Amalek. It has to be wiped out of the world. And that's why you have to kill the women, the children, and everything that belongs to them. So the Rambam, the question is, what about today, Bisman Hazeh? We just said Sancheriv was Mevalbel the world. We don't know who the 7 nations are. Well, maybe we don't know who the Amalek is. So the Rambam in Perek Chamishi in Hilchos Malachim says, the Achshav Bizmanenu Lesdin Shalos Chaya Kol Neshama. The commandment that we were supposed to kill out the 7 nations, that doesn't exist anymore. Kivan de'einanu yodi mihe mashiv amami. Aval eitzel Amalek ba'alocha hei lo amarkin. The Rambam didn't say that. So the Rambam did not say that there is no current din not to wipe out Amalek. The Rambam was silent. So why is there a difference? That by the Zayin Amamin, he was Mevalbel the one. It didn't say that by Amalek. So again, he brings the Iyayam brings from Reb Chaim Brisk, the Brisker Torah, Tzvei Dinim, right? The Brisker Derech is to identify, we think something is really 1, but it's really 2. That's the concept of Tzvei Dinim. The Yesh Ba'Amalek Shtei Halachos. Ha'echad, I'm reading Reb Chaim. Ha'echad, Mishu Mizar Shel Amalek, Choshev Amalek. One way to be Amalek is you can be descended from Amalek. V'hasheni, Mi Shenohe K'Amalek. Yesh Lo Din Amalek. Af Im Eno Mizaram Klal. So people that act like Amalek in the way we just described has a din of Amalek. Therefore, the Rambam didn't say Kvar Ovad Zircham Etzel Amalek. The Afim Enan Yodi Miyem Zaram Shel Amalek, even though we may not genetically know. Ki Kvar Bar Sanchev Bibel Sa'olim Mikol Mokum Yesh Bnei Adam Anohagim B'derech Amalek. Therefore, on those people, Adayin Kaim Mitzvos Mechias Amalek. According to that, Kol Goyim Shem Noagim B'derech Amalek. They wrote Sim Litzayar V'Lilchon La'abedis Yisrael. Eve Af Shein Lehem Shum Revach Bazeh. There's no benefit. V'yesh sakana lahem. That's Amalek. Of course, We saw that in just 50 years ago with Hitler and the Nazis, Yamach Shema. What we know in 1944, 1945, as the Nazis were losing, they kept on pouring in resources into the trains. It not only was it no benefit to them, it was a hefset for them. Yet they kept on killing Jews. So I'm sure, according to the definition that we discussed here, they would certainly be considered Amalek. And by the way, we're going to see that Shaul did not carry out this Nakama, right? He left certain assets. He didn't wipe out all the assets. And therefore, that's one of the reasons why he lost the Malucha. Well, one of his ancestors was then very careful not to do the same thing. That was Mordechai HaYehudi, Ben Kish Ish Yemini. He was careful not to benefit Mishlal Haman. Like it says, Uvaviza lo sholchu es yadam. The Megillah there is very careful to point out that there, when they killed all the people there, they did not put their hand on any of the booty, because he recognized that his ancestor Shaul had not done correctly, and Mordechai tried to correct that. By the way, later on, in one of the psukim, it's going to talk about esachatoim es Amalek, that those Amalekites that are sinners. So the Gris Soloveitchik is medayik from that. The kol mitzvah shemachias Amalek hirak beoisam shlo yishlimu v'lo kiblo im zayin mitzvos bnei Noach. Aval im yishlimu v'kiblo im zayin mitzvos bnei Noach ein horginosam. He wants to say that if Amalek that does tshuva and is now doing the Sheva Mitzvot Bnei Noach, you don't have to kill him. I thought that was very, very interesting diuk of the Grizz.
So does that mean that somebody could, like, you can marry somebody from Amalek?
Well, remember, today we don't even know who's a Mitzri and who's, we have Ador. You couldn't marry a Mitzri until the third generation. We don't know the Mitzri more. We don't know the Moavi more. We don't know the Ammoni more. So I think what he's saying, what the Grizz is saying, is technically if someone had a Yichus brief all the way back to Amalek, but if he did Tshuva and he was doing the Sheva Mitzvahs Bnei Noach, you don't necessarily have to kill him. Okay.
What descendants from Haman that were Jewish?
Say again?
Well, there's descendants from Haman that were Jewish.
Yes, we're going to see that there were Bnei Vonim Shel Haman Limdu Torah B'Bnei Brak, and that's going to come up tonight.
Yeah.
Okay, Pasuk Dalet. Vayishama Shaul es ha'am. So Shaul announced all of this to the people. Now, the Malbim notes later on, Shaul's going to give an excuse that he was afraid of the people. But if he would have been afraid of the people, he would have announced it. So we're going to see later on that Shaul really didn't acknowledge his chet very well. We see this from that pasuk of Vayishma Shaul. He announced it. Later on, he's going to say, "Shahaya Yeresa." He gave, that's one of the excuses he gave. But really, he did make the announcements to the people. What did he do? Vayifkedem bat Ploim, he counted them. So one pshat in Ploim is the name of a place. Another pshat, Rashi says, each person should take one of the sheep of the king, and then they would count the sheep. And in fact, in Yom Chav Beis, Rav Yitzchak Osher Limnos es Yisrael Afilu Dvar Mitzvah. That you're not allowed to count. Later on, Dod HaMelech is going to count the people, and there's going to be a magefa because he counted them.
And the Mayam Lois mentions that the reason they used flyim, lambs, is because this was falling on Pesach. And everybody had, you were going to come to it. Go ahead.
Three-way machlokas. The Radak says everyone gave their own sheep. Yonas ben Uziel says it was a korban Pesach, and Rashi says they took it from Shaul himself. Now, there's going to be a kasha according of Yonas ben Uziel. How could they be makar of the korban Pesach? They're out in a battle place. Remember, Bernie, we learned that you could offer a korban on a private bama, but only a korban like an ola or a shlomim. If you had to bring a korban chatas, you had to travel to Nov, where the Mishkan was. Or if it was Pesach, you had to, or for example, the daily korban atomi that was offered in the Mishkan in Nov. So certain korbanos were not done in your private bama. Korban Pesach was not.
It had to be in Nov.
So how could the Yonas ben Uziel learn? The Radak already said he krivas a korban Pesach benov shahaya shamuel moed v'hayagam korv l'makam l'chama. So the Radak has no problem because he says the battle place wasn't far from Nov, but Yam says chashuv makam sherav Yisrael sham lebama gedola. If the majority of Klal, we're going to see there were hundreds of thousands of Jews here. So a place where there's hundreds of thousands of Jews is like a place of having a Bama Gdola, like the Bama in Nov. And that explains why it might have been the Korban Pesach. But you see, Rashi doesn't learn that way. Rashi says it belonged to Shaul. One of the Chazal say is that when a person is elevated to a Makom Gedula, he becomes very wealthy. So if you remember, Shaul already did a census in the previous war against Nachash. Remember there, they gave pieces of clay. Well, now he's king, and he has. We're going to see there are 200,000 soldiers here. So he gave 200,000 sheep of his own flock. So obviously the Malchus did very good for Shaul. Right? It says Mosayim Elef Ragli, 200,000 foot soldiers, Vaseres Alafim es Yishuda, 10,000 of them from Yehuda. Vayavo Shaul ad Ir Amalek vayarev banachal. Shaul did battle in the river. What river is this? So the Malbim learns that it was a river that they were fighting over. This was like water rights, like regular reasons why people might fight. There was a valley, river running through it. Shaul was claiming it, Amalek was claiming it, so they went to fight. Malbim learns Pashat Pshat. But that's not a Chazal learn. Rashi brings the Chazal. And the Chazal again is in Yuma Chav Beis. The Rabbeinu Amru, Al Iske Nachal Rav. It had to do with the din of Egla Arufa. There is a din that if you have two cities and a corpse is found somewhere outside of the two cities. So you have to measure the corpse to which city it's closest. The Chachamim of that city have to come out. Obviously, because the Torah says that the person must have been killed because nobody accompanied him. So there's a kapara that has to happen. So the kapara is the Egla Arufa. They go down to a river nearby and they decapitate the calf. Normally we shecht from the neck, but here they're decapitated from the back of their head. That's the word Arifa. Egla Arufa means that's the method of decapitation from the back of the head. And then there's a whole ritual that the Chachamim have to do down by the river. So this is what Shaul said to himself. V'dan ba'atzmo. Uma b'shvil nefesh achas. Amra Torah. Arof egla b'nachal. This is just for one corpse. The Torah was requiring a kapara from the chachamim of that town. Bishvil kol nefashos ha'elu lo kol shekain. Here we've been commanded now to wipe out all men, all women, all children. Shouldn't we have compassion? Im adam chata, behema machata. And if the humans sin, what kind of sin did the behemoths do? So now we understand that Shaul was using his own cup. He wasn't listening to the Navi. This is a command by Hashem, and we just went through the reasons why Amalek has to be treated differently. But Shaul made a calculation in his head and had problems with it. By the way, the Gemara there ends saying, Yotza baskol v'amrlo al tehit tzadik harbe. Don't be such a big tzaddik. What's going to happen? Later on, Shaul is going to wipe out the city of Nov Ira Kohanim. He's so enraged by chasing David HaMelech because he's jealous of David HaMelech, he ends up killing all the Kohanim in the city of Nov. So here the compassionate becomes an achzari, becomes cruel. You have to listen to the Dvar Navi. Now, the Nachlas Yaakov, Mefarish on the Torah says, what was Shaul's mistake? By Ammon and Moab, we were told not to fight them. Why? Because Mitam Sha'amar Shnei Freidos Tovas Yeshli Lahotzim. And Baba Kama, Hashem says, I have Rusa Moavia that's going to come out of Moab. So I don't want them destroyed. So the Nachlas Yaakov says, Shol Sabaruch HaKodesh, like what Ellen said. Shebnei Bonav Shel Haman, Shehu Mizera Agag, we're going to see. Shaul did not kill Agag the Melech for one night. And Agag cohabitated that night, and from that relation came Haman. Now Shaul saw Baruch HaKodesh that grandchildren of Haman are going to learn Torah in Bnei Brak. So he made a Kal V'chomer regarding this Egla Rufa. That perhaps the same way that we were told not to wipe out Ammon and Moab, we should not wipe out Agag either. Again, these are mechanisms that Shaul used his own svaras rather than listen to the Navi. By the way, the Kli Yakar says, "The Vadei lo don Shaul kavachomer zeh lavor pi Hashem." His intent was not to go against Hashem. The Hatzadikaya. Shaul is a tzaddik. V'lo yavor is dvar Hashem. Ava b'libo machmas harachmanut shaya b'tivo. Shaul was in general a rachmanistic person. And therefore he asked, why did all these people require to be killed? These machshavos made him l'lamet zchus, and try to moira heter, not to kill them. But that was his mistake, but not that he wanted to learn the Kal V'chomer against what Hashem commanded. That's how the Kli Yakar learns. Weiter. Pasuk Vav, Vayomer Shaul HaKeni. Who are the Keni? Says Rashi, Bnei Yitro. Shahayu Yoshvim b'midbar Yehuda asher b'negev Arad. Shoftim, in Shoftim we learned that they were in Arad. Now remember, Vaishma Melech Arad HaKnani, that in Parshas Chukos, Arad refers to Amalek. That the Keni halchu etzel Yavitz Osniel ben Knaz lilmod Torah. Va'aradu Amalek HaKnani Melech Arad Amalek Haya. Shenemar v'hu Yoshev b'Negev. So somehow the Keni, the Bnei Yisro, were living next to the Amalek. Now, Shaul is about to destroy Amalek. So he gives the Kani a heads up. L'chu, suru, redu mitoch Amalek. Get out of here. Pen osivcha imo. You will be gathered up. Ve'ata asita chesedim kol bnei Yisrael. You did chesedim kol bnei Yisrael. What was that chesed? Baluta b'Mitzrayim. Vayaser Kani mitoch Amalek. And the Kani listened. Now, what's this chesed? So Rashi Shenenu misudas Moshe va'aron v'kol ziknei Yisrael. Rashi's pshat is they participate in the Suda when after Matan Torah, when Moshe and Aaron, the ziknei Yisrael, had a Suda there. So it's as if they did it with all Klal Yisrael. Oh, that Yisro sponsored that Suda, Moshe, Aaron, the ziknei Yisrael, and it's as if they did a chesed with all Bnei Yisrael. However, the Radak says was the Eitzah that he gave to Moshe to put up judges, which was a toivel l'chol Yisrael. The Radak gives another pshat that when Yisro invited Moshe into his home, Kiren lo vayochel lachem, right after Moshe saved Yisro's daughters, Yisro invited him for a meal. Now, if he only gave a chesed to Moshe, why is that considered Klal Yisrael? Yeah, l'lamdech shekol ha'osa toiva im echad migdoli Yisrael, malalav kilu also chesed im kol Yisrael. You do a chesed for Gadol Yisrael, it's as if you did a chesed for Gans Klal Yisrael. Says Gemara in Bracha Samech Gimel. They quote this pasuk, and the Gemara says, "V'lo dvarim kal v'chomer u'ma yitro shlo karvis Moshe el chvod atzmo kach." Now, why did Yisro invite Moshe into his home? You know what? He wanted to marry off his daughter Tzipora to him, so it was for his benefit. So Amareach Tamid Chacham b'toch beiso machilu mashkeu maneu minchasav alachas kama v'kama, that it's going to be considered a great chesed for the person who's Ma'areach Tamid Chacham in his home. That's what it means, Kvod because he wanted Moshe to marry one of his daughters. Zion. Vayach Shaul Amalek mechavila bo achashur shel pnei Mitzrayim. And Shaul wiped out Amalek. Vayispos es Agag melech Amalek chai. They captured Agag alive. It says the people were completely killed out, except for one person, Agag. But from that Agag came Haman. Vayachmol Shaul v'ha'am al Agag. They had pity on Agag. V'al meitav atzon, the sheep, v'abokar, v'hamishnim, the fatty animals, v'al hakorim, v'akol hatov, v'lo'ovu achrim, they didn't want to destroy it. V'chol hamlacha nimza v'names otay chrimu. The livestock that wasn't good, that they destroyed, but they kept the good stuff. They didn't want to destroy that. By the way, Chazal say Rashi doesn't quote it, but it's in Medrash Shmuel. When it says Vayachmol Shaul v'ha'am, bar kapar omer zeh doeg adomi, shaya shachol keneged kol Yisrael. He was as if compared to Gans Kol Yisrael. And he gave the Eitzah not to kill Agag. And he's the one that Shaul is going to send to kill out Nov Irakonim. And he was, and so again goes back to the Rachmanim become Achzorim. He had his reasons. Some of the Meforshim say Doeg said there is a din, you're not allowed to shecht otove at beno b'yamachad. You can't shecht a mother and a child on the same day. So if you kill out the people and you kill out its king, it's like otove et beno.
Where was Shmuel at this time? Was Shmuel with the army?
Shmuel was not with them. Shmuel was Birama. Shmuel had told him what to do. He did not go with Shaul into battle.
Also, it says that Doeg convinced Shaul to kill Achimelech, the leader of the city of Nov, and led to the destruction of the city of Nov and all of its people.
That's what we said. Then we said that here Doeg was a comparison. Don't kill Agag, but later on,
Yeah,
be the cruel ones because
right.
misplaced compassion shows cruelty.
Correct. Yeah.
That's what that was inside of them.
What was misplaced compassion?
Compassion not to kill out the king of the Amalek.
Agog.
Eventually he gets killed. We're going to see. But right now they kept him alive. That one night that they kept him alive led to the birth of Haman, who almost destroyed the Jewish people. Now the Malbim goes through a very interesting syntax. What's the difference between rachamim and to chus, right? To be chas on somebody and to be machmol on somebody. He says rachamim is only for other people. Chemla and chus are even on objects. The difference is you're chas on something because you need to use the item, like a person who's chas on his mammon or his kalim. But chemla is even on something that is you have no benefit from it. You think in your mind that you shouldn't destroy it. So that chemla goes on this item that really had no reason to be kept. Chemla is a dover machshavi. It's something in your thought. Again, it goes back to the concept that he thought that maybe what he was told by the Navi is not correct. You see, his emuna is misrofefes biyado, and therefore comes the next pasuk. I have necham, I have regret that I appointed Shaul king. Kishav macharai, he went against me. Vedvarai lo ikim, he didn't keep my words. Vayichar l'Shmuel, Shmuel was angry. Vayizak l'Shem kol halayla, he davened the whole night. Now this brings up a lot. What does it mean, nechama by Kodesh Baruch Hu? How do we say Kodesh Baruch Hu has regret? Hashem knows everything from the beginning. And he's also going to know that Shaul's going to sin. So what does it mean that he had nechama? And you can ask this in many places. Like when it says, Vayinachem Hashem ki asas adam ba'aretz. So the EAM brings the Shitos HaRishonim that Hashem wanted Shaul to be the Melech and that he should act normally as the Melech. Like we said early on, V'item gam atem v'gam hamelech asher molech aleichem achrei Hashem lokeichem. Ach kol adam yesh lo bechira chavshis lasos tirtzono. All of us have individual free will. Dover shena kodesh baruch hu sholit bo klal. Right? It says, "Hakol bidei shamayim chutz me'yira shamayim." Everything is in the hands of heaven except our decision to be a Yirei Hashem or not to be a Yirei Hashem. Like the Rambam says in Hilchos Tshuva, "Lefichach achshav shechata shol shina Kodesh Baruch Hu ma sherotza." Kodesh Baruch Hu changed what he did. Va'asa shelo yashol od melech al Yisrael. But you're going to tell me kvar yada b'zeh mitchila sheshol yechta, but he already knew that Shaul's going to sin. So this is the famous kash of the Rambam. How do we understand Bechira Chavshi when Hashem knows everything from the beginning? Says the Rambam, she's a dover shi'i efshar la'adam lahavin. It's a paradox that a human intellect cannot comprehend. The concept that we have Bechira, really Hashem knows everything in advance. It's an Hashem intellect and not a human intellect. But when we say that there are 49 levels, Moshe Rabbeinu reached 49th level, but the 50th level he didn't reach. Right? And that's why in the dialogue between Hashem and Moshe and Kisisa, Moshe wants to see Hashem's face. He only sees his back. He shows him his kesher shel tefillin. So a lot of the Meforshim explain these are some of the nakudas, the paradoxes that where human intellect, even by Moshe Rabbeinu, cannot reach that. How do we explain, for example, the paradox of paraduma, where it's metame, it's metayer tmeim, right? It has the ability to make pure anyone who's tamei. Well, but if somebody who's tor touches it, he becomes tamei. I understand. If this thing can be metayer tmeim, kal v'chomer, it should not be metame tohorim. So that's what Shlomo Melech himself said. It's rechoka mimeni. Shlomo Melech, the wisest of all men, could not comprehend the paradox of paraduma. So we're in the same sort of realm here with this issue of originally Shaul was appointed king and now he wasn't. Okay, so wow. We are on Pasuk Yud Aleph. There's a lot going on in this parak. I think we'll be able to finish it next week, God willing. We will have a shiur next Sunday. Any comments, questions about anything we talked about tonight? Howie?
Go ahead.
Gitti and I were discussing, it was our understanding, we will say this at the same time, that Shaul kind of like was making up excuses. I want to be sacrifices for you, but David HaMelech copped out and he admitted he was wrong. So that was another reason why there was a distinction between the two.
Very good. We're going to, next week, God willing, we're going to go through 10 distinctions that the Meforshim bring between David and Shaul. We're going to see very good, like how he said, that when it came, we didn't learn it tonight, but when it came down to admitting, was he a chota or not, Shaul didn't hit the bar.
Correct.
Waffle, and David very much admitted. So that we will discuss that when we get.
That's what HaKadosh Baruch Hu by Adam and Chava. If he would have admitted then, he wouldn't have been thrown out of the Gan Eden. The admitting of the chait, it's like we're coming to Yom Kippur. If you admit, okay, I'm responsible, that responsibility goes with you, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu has an understanding for that you can do tshuva. The fact that he wasn't not taking he never took responsibility for what he did. It was always something else. And that's
does at the end. At the end, he'll say chatasi. It's going to be in stages. So in the but initially, it wipes him out. You're correct, Walter.
Is there any parallel between what Nadav and Abihu did by bringing the that they went beyond what they were